What up, everybody? I'm back. More crazy stuff to talk about. I feel like, you know, the things I'm bringing up, I'm trying to find my place in all this because I don't really, you know, I'm just the average weed grower guy that, you know, weed growers, we don't have like a political attachment to these political parties or anything because we've always been treated like shit by both of them, quite frankly. So I don't know. I'm just talking about things that I feel like are important that people should talk more about. But I don't really. There's no way that I'm gonna stand out in the crowd with any of this. But I'm gonna keep doing it until I figure out where I'm going with all this or whatever. Because I feel like this is good for my mental health, I guess. Because like I said, ever since I gotten censored off of Twitter, I feel like I don't have any way to react to all the stuff going on. Now, one of the things going on, I feel like, is that this country, we had it for the longest time. It was kind of like the government could pretend like it wasn't just a big captured entity that works strictly for the profits of corporations, but now they just brazenly do all these things right out in the open and act like it's no big deal. Now, we can look at all these examples, and there's always going to be money for the military budget. There's always going to be more money for police budgets. There's always going to be more money to expand the surveillance state. There's always going to be more money to hire and create more agencies to fight this domestic terrorism. So what it starts to look like, and when things happen here, there's no money for it. And now I got a little list here. I got Hawaii, East Palestine, COVID, Flint, Katrina, Andrew. There's probably more that I'm forgetting about. 9/11, the victims, the families of the people that died in the towers have always been treated like basically like they're crazy for asking questions. So it feels like there's this invisible hand that controls what our government can and can't do, and whether it's the 100,000 residents in Flint, Michigan getting lead poisoned in their water, or whether it's Hawaii where billions of dollars worth of property damage happens, and the government's just like, whatever. Here, we'll give you $700 per household for I don't even know what that's for, but by now I'm sure everybody that lost everything already spent well over $700 just trying to find food and medicine. East Palestine. Recent reports, as recent as a week ago, from people on the ground testing water, people's wells, testing animals, and they're saying that this is not even close to being clean. It's not even close to being acceptable. But yet we're not hearing anything about any relocation attempt. The government is not doing anything for the people there at all that I know of. If you know of something that they're doing, let me know. Then you had COVID where, the government, now in all these instances, including Ukraine where the corporations are the military industrial complex, the government always favors giving money to corporations instead of the people or the workers, or doing big money infrastructure to help things like Flint, East Palestine, Hawaii. Now you have and what it is it's like the government is just this thing that corporations use to extract wealth from the people. Now, I mean, probably the biggest example to me is COVID, where they shut down any discussion about early treatment. They demonized things that could treat it. I'm not going to mention. Well, I guess now that the FDA said it is okay to prescribe, ivermectin's one of them. They demonized it and called it horse paste and all this stuff while putting people on remdesivir and ventilators, which are guaranteed to kill you. Um, this was all done so that the corporations that were making these experimental vaccines were allowed to be the only solution and get their emergency use acts granted. So to me, that just looks like the corporations used the government to make sure that they could offload millions or billions of these doses and shots, uh, totally, experimental, a completely new technology. And, there's no way they would have brought this to market in any other way without some major thing happening. No, I'm not saying on this video particularly, I'm not saying that the government invented the virus so that they can put the vaccine out that they already had invented or anything. You can look into that yourself. There's probably a lot of evidence to that effect. But what I'm saying here today is that the government and corporations combined, they never let any disasters go to waste. They always find a way to profit off of these disasters. And, you always see it later on with the no bid contract coming in, and all these companies that are being used are funded by the same Vanguard, BlackRock, New World Order investment teams. So that's kind of where we are right now, and you got this situation in Hawaii where it seems like the authorities don't want to answer any questions. They don't want to really give you good explanations as to what happened. The leading theory of how it really did happen is these power lines ignited some tall grass that was down. We got video evidence of this happening. We have whistleblowers talking about how they were petitioning the electric company for years to clean up certain areas of this grass. I mean, it looks like that could be how it was caused. And it's one of those things where it's just negligence with a kind of a known result that would happen eventually. And this land that was burned just happens to be this place where all these indigenous people still live, and that banks and real estate developers, and specifically Goldman Sachs and now BlackRock and other big interest investment firms want to buy that land up. And you're already hearing residents talking about how they're already getting offers, and people are already coming in talking about it. And now you have places where the fire didn't even damage homes. Those people in that same area are also being told to evacuate. So this is starting to me to look very much like another one of these things where I don't know if this was caused by, the government's negligence or the electric company, who these days, these monopolistic electric companies, you might as well call them the government too, because they get government subsidies and funded by the government. They're also funded by your money because they charge exorbitant amounts for kilowatt hours. And then they get all this renewable energy where the government invests on their solar and wind and geothermal and all this, but they don't pass that savings down to you. They pretend like they invested on it, so they can charge you more now. And so you might as well call them the government, because they're very little removed from actually being the government. Try not paying your bill for a couple months and see what happens. So this is big. This stuff where the government and corporations get together and they screw over the people in order to enrich the corporations. And that's important for them to keep that going. And now, the censorship stuff that I keep bringing up, I know it's probably annoying and everybody's talking about it, so you probably already heard every talking point I could deliver about it. But I'm telling you, it's because COVID was just an exercise to see what they could actually pull off. Now, before COVID, there was this thing that the Rockefeller Foundation did. It was a study called Lockstep. And in that study, they tried to figure out a bunch of different ways by studying authoritarian regimes and authoritarian times in history, to what would be the best possible thing to bend even the most ardent, freedom loving, liberty loving, democracy loving, whatever you want to call it, people that like to not be interfered by with government stuff, what is it going to take to get those people to fall in line? And they figured out what they could do, and they figured out what they thought worked, and they're going to go forward with that for the next thing that they're about to try to do. Now, I already discussed, I don't know what that could be. Now, I'm hearing a lot about this climate emergency that we're supposed to beg the Biden administration to put us under, which I am not for that at all. What is a climate emergency? Well, a declaration of an emergency by the federal government means that they have these sweeping powers. It's basically martial law. You can do whatever they want. They can tell you to do it. They go back to the lockdowns. After the lockdowns were wearing on people, there was reports out that, oh, look, the lockdowns actually lowered, greenhouse gas emissions, and all this. So, it was touted as being like something that they could do in a climate emergency. Guys, if everybody got locked in their houses for 200 years, it's not going to make the greenhouse gases lower. None of that's going to change. This whole problem with pollution starts at the corporate level. They're the ones doing all the polluting. Like, I didn't ask for single-serving package containers or straws to be made by the billions, or masks to be distributed by the hundreds of billions. All these things ended up in landfills and in the oceans and all this stuff. And it's disgusting, actually, quite frankly. And all these things take massive amounts of chemicals to produce. All the stuff that we make is made out of petrochemicals, and that's unsustainable. I mean, we should be making anything that you can make out of petrochemicals you can make out of hemp. Why isn't that being done? Nobody that claims to be serious climate activists that I've ever seen has ever mentioned hemp, except for one person that I can think of. And, Jack Herer, who wrote the book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes, back in the 80s, describing how hemp could save the planet. Because you could use hemp to produce all the cosmetic stuff that they make. You can make hemp to produce building materials. Hempcrete is better than concrete. You can make pretty much anything you can make with plastics, all the way from cellophane to the kind of plastics that are durable enough to put on spaceships. This can all be made from hemp, and you can actually run automobiles and engines, combustible engines, on ethanol produced from hemp. So the whole argument about what we're supposed to do about this climate emergency, like, none of them have real solutions, and the emergency would be back to martial law and whatever things that they're going to implement to claim that they're fighting the climate thing. They're talking about this net zero carbon thing, and they're not trying to do anything to go to net zero. The biggest polluter is the military industrial complex companies and the U.S. military. They produce more greenhouse gases than a couple of countries, I'm pretty sure. No one's going to slow down their building of new drone bases. No one's going to stop all the new fighter jets and helicopters and tanks, and they just keep building these things, which, just building them things alone, massive amounts of greenhouse gas production. Building, big giant ships, this is to them, that's nothing. They're like, oh, well, we got to make it so you don't drive as much so we can build more bombs, pretty much. Is that what they're saying? And, these other corporations, you got your oil barons, they're not going to slow down anything. They're going to keep drilling everywhere they can until there's nothing left to drill. You got your, and then you got your solar and wind companies. Now, these things take massive amounts of of carbon, big carbon footprints to make these, and then drive them to where they got to go, and then set them up and hook them up to a grid and all this. It's not like I'm against doing it, but I'm saying it's not an answer. And you could hook up all the solar and wind that you want. It's not going to be enough to run things as things are currently running. Right now those things are about 10% of the pie chart. If you add in geothermal and throw in nuclear, well, let's just throw in new nuclear, because there isn't really a whole lot of new nuclear, but it is a good piece of the pie chart to be mentioned. When it comes to energy going forward, it's just there's no grasping of the concept that the people involved in all these different energy platforms are greedy and they're just trying to make money themselves. I mean, renewable energy is a $100 billion industry. It's growing. And so I don't, where I stand on all this is that everybody should be a little more responsible in their own way, but that alone isn't going to help anything. If everybody stopped driving cars, that's not going to stop anything. And by the way, we've seen with COVID, and you should understand that whenever the government tries to roll out some big thing that they're going to mandate everybody to do, I don't care what that thing is, there's always going to be people that aren't going to be for it, and they're not going to want to do it, and they're going to have good reasons. And you got to listen to them people, and you got to take into consideration what you can do to make sure your plan still happens. Now, when it comes to the shots or whatever, they definitely figured that out by making it so it was something that could move from person to person, and the people that didn't get it are still going to get affected by it. And that's the way they're doing with a lot of things. The climate thing, truly, you really got to see that they're just trying to use this as a dividing and conquering thing. They're going to get all the people that think they're on the righteous side of it to become fascist again, just like they were during COVID. Oh, you got to do this because it's the right thing. Well, things that are said to be the right things and things that are said to be for safety is always how totalitarian fascism comes. It comes to be the thing that helps you, that makes life easier. But essentially it doesn't, because it's the worst way to run a collective. Forcing everybody to do things because somebody says this is the thing to do. You always got to be vigilant. You always got to look into things and make sure that you're looking at all sides. And that's another big thing that people need to start doing when you're in these discussions about these things. The government and the tools that they have on social media are unbelievable. Like you hear about the shadow banning and the bots and the bot farms and the troll farms, but you have no idea how prevalent this is on the internet. Every comment section is full of these influencers, for a lack of a better word, that are going to try to influence your opinion towards their thing. And the way they do that is with consensus or a false sense of consensus, and they just beat you down with all these people in the comment section. So you can't really rely on that kind of. You gotta look at what the government is doing with that, and why are they doing that. And I feel like we got to start admitting to ourselves that the government is and has been at war with us for a very long time. And now they have way more technological means to know what we're doing, and there's no way, you can even, just talking about this stuff is dangerous for some reason. And who knows, maybe even just talking about this stuff enough, I might get my YouTube channel taken away. And that's just the world we live in now. The government, together with these corporations like Google, And like Twitter and everybody else, they're just all one big happy family working against you, and they're at war with us.